This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Good morning, Kentuckiana. You're here on 970 AM on Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus, and soon to be also the president of the Louisville Tea Party. I first want to handle a little bit of business. Where can you hear all of the stuff, hear and see, actually, all of the stuff that we're gonna talk about today? First, if you have Spectrum TV, we will be on channel 21 in the Louisville area, anywhere that has Spectrum, I think, on channel 21 at 12:30, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m., the last that I heard. Just, check your TV guide and make sure Kentucky's Voice shows up on that. We also have a YouTube and a Facebook live stream. You want to search for Kentucky's Voice on either of those two options. Those should be basically currently running a video of what we are discussing over the radio. We will also post clips on Facebook as well as the YouTube channel. So I encourage you to go to that YouTube channel, search for Kentucky's Voice, and over the next few hours, we eventually will post a final video. If you want to text in, I'll do my best to try to incorporate some listener comments if I can, work that out. You feel free to text in at 502-571-0970. You can also use that number. If you text the word give, we will send out a link if you want to try to support this ministry / radio program / podcast. And so just text the word give to that 502-571-0970. You can also find us on the web at kyvoice.org. So not .com, kyvoice.org. All right, I think that's most of the business. I do want to promote an event that is happening tonight. If you are in Northern Kentucky, maybe you will be listening to us or viewing us on a podcast. TJ Roberts, who the guest that we have on today, has endorsed TJ, I believe, and TJ has endorsed him. So he is having a fundraiser tonight at 6 p.m. at, I believe, the Boone County Courthouse. He will have a guest, Scott Jennings of CNN fame. So Scott Jennings is going to be promoting his book and also just basically appearing at the campaign kickoff and fundraiser for TJ Roberts. So if you're in the Northern Kentucky area around Boone County, Grant County, Kenton, Campbell, you know the area, try to stop in there. And I believe if you give $75 at least to TJ Roberts' campaign, you can get a signed book from Scott Jennings. Okay. I think that's most of our business. I'm very excited about today's show. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, and that's how do we reduce the cost of government to the people? In other words, how do we reduce taxes? How much taxes are we paying? Where is that money coming from? And if you've ever looked at your property tax bill or any of the other taxes that you follow, just keep a journal with you for one day and just look at how many different taxes that you are paying on a daily basis. You will be shocked. Okay, so that's going to be a focus of today's show. The guest that I have on today is Shannon Denniston. He is a state rep candidate for State District 74. It's currently held by David Hale, who is retiring. And Shannon has stepped up. He's going, I am supporting his campaign, but we will get into that in our first segment. You'll be introduced to Shannon Denniston, and we'll be talking over both his platform, what his background is. But he is very passionate about reducing taxes, among other things. So in addition to our discussion of taxes, we'll get into some other elements of his platform and why he got into the race. So come back after the break. I'm excited to introduce you to Shannon Denniston. He did appear on Andrew Cooper Ryder's show. You may have seen that. An engaging man, and I hope you come back right after this break. You're here on Kentucky's Voice. I'm Dr. Lance Pearson.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to 970 AM. I'm your host on Kentucky's Voice, Dr. Lance Pearson of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and also the Louisville Tea Party. Today's show, which I just introed, we're going to be talking a lot about tax policy. That's going to be probably at least half of our show. Where are your taxes coming from? How do we reduce those? What are our highest priority tax reductions that we might be able to get in this next budget session from your state legislature? This first segment, however, I'm going to bring on a very special guest. He's actually going to be joining me for the rest of the show if we can keep our connection. That person I want to bring on is Shannon Denniston. Shannon Denniston is running for the state house for a state rep position in District 74, which includes Montgomery County, Bath County, and Menifee County. Basically, a little bit east and north of Lexington, Fayette County. So Shannon Denniston, can we bring him on? Okay. So you can see, good-looking guy if you're on our podcast. He's an engaging personality, and I'm excited to talk his campaign over with him. So first, Shannon, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners/viewers and just basically tell us a little bit about your background. And then right after that, we'll get into why you decided to run for office. But just tell us a little bit about who you are before we even talk about the politics.
Well, great. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Well, I'm Shannon Denniston. I'm coming to you live from Mount Sterling, Kentucky, where I'm the fourth generation of my family to live here and call Montgomery County my home. So I grew up in a farming family on a farm. We used to milk cows twice a day, and we raised crops, tobacco being the main crop, and put up a lot of hay. Yep. So we had a large garden and a lot of vegetables and different things like that as well. So that's where I was taught work ethic and discipline. And the summers were twice as hard. I remember all my friends in school, they would be excited to go to Disney World or go on a summer vacation. And I wasn't as excited because I knew that there was twice the amount of work, if not more, waiting on me during summer break. So
I had the same experience. Yep. Go ahead.
So a lot of us, we got our foundations as children. And hopefully carry it through to our adult life. So I got involved in politics about 11 years ago or so when I ran for magistrate here in Montgomery County, and I actually became the first elected Libertarian in the state of Kentucky. And since then, I've re-registered as Republican. I believe you have a great shot at getting elected today as other parties at your local level, but when it comes to the state level, it's a total different animal, and you need the voting base to move forward. So that was a large part of why I switched parties, but also I'm very closely aligned today with the Republican Party, and it was just the best vehicle for this campaign. So that's a little bit about me there. I've been fighting local taxes for almost 20 years, property taxes specifically in Montgomery County, and try to help others out in other counties. We'll, I think, talk about later the fight over in Powell County with their school tax, 16+% increase this year. And we'll get into that later. But yeah. I've been the only elected official actually in my county, not just in this race, but in the county to actually stand and fight alongside taxpayers. So I have a strong history there in doing so, and just trying to keep housing prices affordable. I try to do my part. That is my product. I'm a real estate broker, builder, developer, housing provider. We've provided housing to hundreds, if not thousands of families over the past 23 years. And, you walk through some people's homes, and a lot of these taxing districts will say, well, it's just an extra $12 a month. A lot of people don't have a box spring. They don't have a bed frame. Yeah. There's just a mattress sitting on the floor somewhere in a corner of a room. So I wish that people could see just how hard people have it, and maybe they would warm up to the idea, of making housing affordable again.
100%. And so you can hear from his voice how passionate he is about this. As a business owner he's got I don't know what the phrase is. It fingers in a lot of pies, but he's basically a go-getter that's in lots of different areas, but especially he's involved in housing. We will talk a little bit about housing later on in the show with him, but especially we'll talk about tax policy as we go forward. So can you just basically run down a little bit, just a high-level overview of some of the priorities that you have? What's kind of basically your platform?
Sure, absolutely. So at the top of the platform, most of the support for our campaign, I say our campaign, it's not my campaign. I'm not doing
That's
this
right.
for me. It's for everybody else. And obviously, I mean, I'm in a business that will carry on, you know, at some degree, I hope, with my full-time focus being a representative. And a representative is just that, to represent others. It's to represent yourself too, but it's, everybody, right? So
Right.
what do the people in my district need the most,
Right.
from state level government? What do our mayors, our judge executives, what do they need in each of the three counties, which is Montgomery, Bath, and Menifee? And so ending property taxes at the top of the list, and we're going to dig into that later too. But the Cliff Note version of it is we just want to change the funding mechanism for local government away from a property tax and put it onto a state level sales tax,
Right.
increase the sales tax, very similar to what we're doing with the income tax. And I certainly support that and want to keep pushing for that to get our state income tax to zero. We go to 3.5% January 1. So we're, almost halfway there, I guess, to where we're going. But at 0.5% per year, I'd like to peel that Band-Aid off, or just go ahead and rip it off faster if we can,
Yeah.
and get on with it. I mean, fast forward to the day when there's no income tax, there's no property tax in Kentucky. What does that look like for businesses wanting to come here and relocate and bring their jobs and compete for our labor and drive up labor prices, because that certainly is needed. People just are not making enough money to buy the necessities, much less any luxuries. So, very, very important things: ending the property tax, ending the state income tax, and being the first state in the nation to get it done, or one of the first. And I also support State Representative Savannah Maddox's bill to return the driver's licensing back to our county courthouses.
Absolutely.
That's a very loud talking point amongst my constituents. They are not happy with the regional offices. They're very inefficient. Some of them have been sent home and asked to come back. It's just it's just not rolled out well. It's not working well. So they
Right.
want to go back to the other way. I've had, I think, one critic on that issue,
Yeah.
which is not my issue, but I do support, like I said, Representative Maddox's bill to return that. But their complaint, the only criticism was they said there was corruption at the local levels, and to them I responded, well, let's take care of the corruption. There's going to be corruption at any level.
That's right. I mean, there's corruption. We just had a scandal. I mean, we just had a scandal where we were basically selling state licenses at this new system to illegal immigrants for $200 a pop. So, yeah, no matter, government corruption isn't a unique phenomenon of local government. You'll find it at every level. If anyone has ever paid attention to Fox News on any day of any week. Okay, and you also have some interesting policies that we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of trying to promote more affordable housing. You talked about how much you care about people that are basically struggling. There's a lot of people that are living paycheck to paycheck, or even less than paycheck to paycheck, if we're honest. There's a lot of people that are basically financing their grocery bills on their credit cards. They're racking up credit card debt, hoping that, maybe they'll get a raise in their job so they can start paying down some of that credit card debt. So there's a lot of people struggling. And one of the biggest struggles that people are housing is rent is sky high, and real estate prices are sky high. So as a realtor, we'll talk about that a little bit more. You also have some interesting ideas about some education, basically allowing people to use some of the public facilities, given that they are paying for those public facilities. You just want to intro that. We'll talk about that later in the show also.
Sure. So what we have right now is the athletic facilities are controlled by the local government school system. So that means that all the children in the non-government schools don't have access to those athletic facilities that their parents have paid taxes to fund.
Right.
And I don't think it's fair. It's a conversation that needs to be had. People aren't happy about it. The easiest way to fix it is just to move the athletics, separate it from academics, focus on academics and education, get these test scores up, make Kentucky, shine in the nation for test scores. Right now, we're very low on our test scores. So the focus needs to be on education, academics, not athletics. But my idea is to move the athletics under Parks and Recreation, because then they can utilize the tourism dollars, which our state is making more and more of, mainly because of the Red River Gorge area.
Yep.
It's ranked number 7 in the nation for highest return on investment dollar for tourists right now, for tourism. So number 7 in the nation. It beat out like Orlando, Florida, and Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So there's a lot of investors, a lot of development taking place in the Red River Gorge, which is multiple counties, really close to my district. So our county is starting to benefit from Menifee as well.
Yeah. And I know you own some maybe some rental property, but I think you own some property in Powell County, so you also spend some time there.
I do. I spend about almost a month, maybe about a month a year there camping.
Yeah.
We own 3 cabin lots that we hope to build cabins on one day. We
Yeah.
used to own a cabin there and we sold it.
Okay. Well, I hope our listeners are as impressed by your background, your interest, your passion for your community, the way that I am. I am supporting Shannon Denniston in this race. And I will say for our listeners, we'll continue to have him on the rest of the show. But if we can get $800 over the next 2 weeks to his campaign, I will match $200 of that. So another quarter match. I'll make sure that I give my $200 to match your $800 from our listeners to support him and encourage his run for the State House. We need new ideas. Join us after the break. We'll talk about tax policy.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. You're probably listening to us right now on 970 AM in the Louisville area. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and also the Louisville Tea Party. In this next segment, we're going to have Shannon Denniston, who is a candidate for Kentucky House District 74, which is Montgomery, Bath, and Menifee counties. But in this next segment, we're basically going to dedicate the whole segment to tax policy. I do want to first pitch. I mentioned to our listeners that if our listeners over the next 2 weeks give at least $800, I'm going to pitch in $200 to get him up to $1,000 for his upcoming campaign and then in the next year. So his website, if you want to check it out, this actually is going to currently redirect to his Facebook page, but there will be a full website. We're still a month and a half from the filing deadline, by the way. So he got an early start, and he's doing a great job so far in his campaign. That website is Denniston, and that's like the name Dennis, a boy's name Dennis, TON.com. Oh, sorry. Denniston for Kentucky. Spell all of that out, FORKY.com, Denniston4KY.com. And if you want to donate, go to the direct donation page. You go to donate.denniston4KY.com, DENNISTONFORKY.com. Okay, we'll pitch that a couple more times. I'm sure I butchered that in terms of our listeners understanding it, but we'll get it right before the end of the segment. Denniston4KY.com. Okay. I first want to basically give some of the background statistical information about where our tax revenue as a state comes from. Now, for most people, most of your tax money is actually coming from the federal government rather than the state government. I mean, so when you get your tax bill, your biggest bill, although it doesn't seem like it because a lot of people have withholding, your biggest tax bill is coming from the federal government. Most people are paying a marginal rate of about 30% of all of the money that they bring in. I think on the high end, we're in the 39% of all of your income goes to the federal government. Now, your employer may be taking out that, and then it feels like you're getting a tax. You feel like the government is paying you when tax day rolls around. You get that refund check. That's your money. The money that is being refunded to you is stuff that you have overpaid over the course of a year that's been taken out of your paycheck. So I know it's kind of deceptive, but the government overall is taking a large amount of your income. Now, at the state level, it's much smaller. We currently, we currently are at 4.5% that we're paying. Yeah, exactly. So if you are watching our podcast, we have a graphic up. As of this year, we are paying 4%. So when you file your tax bill, you will be paying a 4% income tax on all of the income that you earn in the state of Kentucky. If you look at the surrounding areas, that's relatively close to the surrounding areas with the exception of Tennessee, which has no state income tax. So Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Nevada, Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, and also New Hampshire don't have a state income tax. Although I believe that New Hampshire does have an income tax on capital gains. So anyway, almost all of the states have an income tax. For comparison's sake, Indiana has lowered their income tax rate down to 3%, and Ohio is at 3.5%. We are lower than the other one. So whereas a few years ago we had a state income tax that was 4% for low income earners and 6% for high income earners, we now have everyone down to 4%. And starting next year, starting with 2026, that will be down to 3.5%. So we are progressively lowering that income tax, which does, and if we're being honest, it does preferentially benefit high income earners, but we do want to encourage high income earners to move to our state. So the argument, and I think it's a reasonably valid argument, is by lowering income tax, you encourage people that are high income earners to come to your state, and now you're getting 3.5% or 3% of their income when they move to your state, rather than 0% when they're living in a different place. So having attractive tax policy does encourage growth in your own state, mostly by encouraging people to move to your state and making it an attractive place to live. Now, state income tax is not the only source of our state funds. We have about a $15 billion state budget. That's in the general fund. We've got about a $4 billion budget from the road fund, and then we have some other miscellaneous funds that our state spends. As of 2023, about 39% of all of our state income, which is really your tax money that's funding the state, comes from our individual income tax. That is gradually decreasing. Every time we have a 0.5% decrease in taxes, which we want to continue at least until we are competitive with all of our other states, maybe with the exception of Tennessee in the near term. Every time that we reduce it 0.5%, the state loses in terms of its revenue. That means more money in your pocket, about $750 million. So that is a substantial hit every time we have a 0.5% decrease in income tax. We have made up some of that through increases to sales and use tax. So if we can put up the graphic of our sales tax in Kentucky relative to our other states. So you can see, based on this, there are a couple of states that don't have a sales tax, New Hampshire, Montana, Oregon, but most states do have a state sales tax. Ours overall is at 6%. That's the lowest in any surrounding state except for Virginia, which is just slightly lower at 5.77. So in terms of wanting to be competitive with our surrounding states, we are already pretty competitive on the sales tax front. For reference, Indiana is at 7% and Ohio is at 7.3%. So if we are going to boost any sort of taxes and still remain competitive with our surrounding states, sales tax is one area that we might consider offsetting some of these other tax increases that we might want to implement. Okay, can we move to corporate tax? Another source of our state's tax revenue is through corporate taxes. Our current corporate tax rate is at 5% for the state of Kentucky. That makes us pretty competitive. However, for reference, and you'll notice, whenever you hear about a giant corporate headquarter moving somewhere, or maybe a X billion-dollar facility being put into a particular state, I always hear about Texas. Texas keeps bringing in lots and lots of corporations that are moving their headquarters there. Well, one of the biggest reasons is because Texas has no corporate tax rate. Also, for our competing states, Ohio also has no corporate tax. So if we're thinking about really cutting down on our taxes to be competitive, I think corporate taxes is an excellent target for that. And we're going to get into this extensively in the next segment. If we can put up the graphic for property taxes, this is what we're really going to focus in on the next segment. This is a core plank of Shannon Denniston, who we will have on in the next segment's campaign platform, is working to end property tax. So property tax, Kentucky is relatively competitive. We're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of the nation. But we pay the property tax paid as a percentage of our owner-occupied housing value. So, relative to the house, your main house, Kentucky pays at about a 0.73% tax rate. So for reference, Ohio is substantially higher at 1.31, but West Virginia and Tennessee have lower property taxes than Kentucky does. And so Tennessee, for example, is 0.49, and West Virginia is at 0.48. So after the break, we're going to be joined again by Shannon Denniston, and we're going to talk over the proposal to end property tax. What might that entail? Join us after the break. You're on Kentucky's Voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson. You're probably listening to us right now on 970 AM. Later on, you'll be able to see us on Channel 21 at 12:30, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m. if you have Spectrum TV. We also have a YouTube channel and a Facebook. I recommend you check out that YouTube channel. Just search for Kentucky's Voice, and you can click around there and see some of our past videos and our latest videos, which will be this in a couple of hours. Okay, we spent the last segment talking about general tax policy, both federal, but especially at the state level, how we compare to our neighboring states and also states around the country. I'm joined by a candidate for Kentucky State House by the name of Shannon Denniston. That's Denniston, Shannon Denniston. You can check out his website, which currently redirects to his Facebook page, but that's Denniston4FORKY.com, and you can donate directly to him at donate.denniston4ky.com. I will be quarter matching up to 200 for me, 800 for you over the next 2 weeks. I hope you give and really support local politics, because what your local politicians and what your state politicians do is more important for your everyday life than what even our national politicians do usually. Okay, so let me bring Shannon Denniston back on. A key plank, and this is actually on your campaign signs. I do want to actually mention Shannon just had, was it yesterday or was it on Saturday? He just had his campaign kickoff event, right?
That's right. That was on Saturday. Sunday's the Lord's Day, guys.
That's right. That's right. So on Saturday, and so I saw all the pictures. I wasn't able to make it, but fireworks, over 100 people. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm on the ground for his campaign.
Oh, yeah.
I hope our listeners get behind him. But even on his campaign signs, he has end property tax. And so, by the way, that's great. If you're a candidate, have a very simple message. Everybody knows that one of the key things that he's going to push when he gets elected to the state legislature is ending property tax. So, Shannon, why don't you just talk about what our property taxes in the state, basically how are those an impact on people, especially people of limited financial means, but basically any property owner in the state, how that affects our economy and what gradually and incrementally reducing that might do for our state.
Sure, absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you, Lance, and thanks for having me on the show again.
Absolutely.
I know most of you guys are still recovering from opening your property tax bill, so I'll try to cheer you up with a little bit of the plan and where we're wanting to take things here in the Commonwealth. So the property taxes are a big deal. I had a gentleman call me, he does some work for me, and he said, "Shannon, are you sitting down?" I said, "Why do I need to be?" So maybe I am. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, I got my property tax bill in the mail."
Yep.
And I said, "Well, what did it do this year?" And he said, "It tripled." And I said, "What do you mean
Oh,
it tripled?"
man.
I said, "You got a pretty nice house. What do you mean it tripled?" And he said, "Well, it tripled." And I said, "Well, so it's like how much?" And he said, "It went from about 2,000 to 6,000."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, how did that happen?" I said, "What'd you do? Did you build like a whole nother house on top of your house or behind your house?" He said, "No, haven't done anything in years, like 5 to 8 years, haven't touched a thing." And what happened is there were some home sales in his neighborhood, and
Yeah.
it triggered his reassessment. And in Kentucky, by law, the PBAs have to reassess your property at least once every 4 years. I believe in Scott County and some others they do it more frequently, like annually.
That's right.
But around here, it's around 4 years, somewhere around 4 years. So what had happened is they reassessed his values based on neighboring sales
Yeah.
on his street or in his neighborhood, and they'd reassessed it from 200 and some thousand to 700 and some thousand. So I don't think it's fair, number one, that we have to rent our property from the government. I don't believe that it's fair that you have to rent your vehicle from the government either.
Yeah.
And I want to remove the tax from the motor vehicles, just like from real estate,
Right.
and also personal tangible property tax. So when I say property tax, I mean all property taxes: automobile, watercraft, aircraft, recreational vehicles, personal tangible property of our businesses. I had a friend, he used to own a factory. He's now in retirement, but he said one time the government knocked on his door, came in and counted each roll of toilet paper inside of his employee bathrooms, and then charged him a tax on the number of rolls of toilet paper. I think that's too extreme. We've allowed government to step far outside its boundaries,
Yeah.
and it's time now that we rein it in. I don't think we're too late, but we're getting to that point. So the property tax would be a large, easy way, I think, to make housing more affordable. Is it going to cut the price of housing in half? No, it's not. Are the rents going to come down a whole lot? Probably not. The problem with the rents is they're already depressed as it is, but by cutting the property tax, that's going to save a renter, in the neighborhood of about $200 per month from the rent potentially, because about $200 a month of a person who of their rent is represented by property taxes. Now it might be a little more, or a little less, but
Right.
somewhere around that number. Does that mean that a person renting is going to see that discount in their rent? Probably not. And here's what's going on with the rents. Are the $80,000 homes in Kentucky that you could buy a lot of homes, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,000 square foot, cookie cutter style homes just a few years ago for about $80,000. The rent on those properties was about $800 per month, or 1%. It's referred to as the 1% investors rule. And today, those $80,000 properties are about $225,000,
Right.
which means the rent should be around $2,250 per month. However, people can only afford about $1,200 to $1,400 per
Right.
month.
Right.
So a lot of people are starting to sell the rentals and to owner occupants where they make more sense, and it's creating more of a demand, and it's weakening the supply of rental properties. So there's a
Right.
whole lot at play here right now. Housing prices, have tripled. The rents have not tripled. They maybe went up by half or something.
Right.
So the rents do have to go on up if we want to continue having rental housing available for folks.
Right. And so many of the things that are increasing property values or housing costs are totally beyond the state level control even. I mean, we're talking about federal interest rates, the Fed rate, how much the bonds are selling for, how much the Treasury bonds are selling for. So there's lots of things that, like, no matter what our state policy is, there's some national trends that are pushing up the price of housing, and so that has a trickle down effect. One thing that we can control at the state and the local level. So I want to emphasize. Ending property tax isn't only a state level issue where the state legislature sets these policies. It's also your county fiscal court. Very important to have good people that want to reduce taxes in those positions. It also is your all of the special taxing districts. For example, your local school board is able to levy property taxes on you. Your local fire district is able to levy taxes. Your library is able to levy property taxes on you. Your I believe in some places, even the Soil and Conservation District can levy property taxes. So when you get that property tax bill, I want you to look at it and see all of the different taxes that are being put on to your property taxes if you are a landowner. And so we know that this isn't going to be. So first of all, let me say, I'm basically opposed to every type of tax. I could come up with an argument against every single type of tax. So, you know, I mean, we don't want to be zealots here, but I do think that property taxes are one direct way that we can simplify the tax code and remove the burden from people that really need to have that burden lifted. And there is a lot of burden for financing everything else that's being placed on property owners in the state. So what are some of the incremental steps do you think in the near term are things that maybe when you get elected to the state legislature and maybe the first couple years, we can make some progress on reducing that property tax with the goal of eventually ending it altogether? But obviously this is going to be an incremental process. So what are some of the like highest priority or things that you think there's the most appetite for in the state legislature?
Well, we shouldn't be renting our homes from the government, right? So the sooner we can get that burden off of folks, the better. Something that can happen immediately, and I say immediately, I mean, nothing happens immediately in government, right? but something that should happen at first is we should ask our state legislators to freeze property values on real estate immediately. Freeze everyone's property values until ownership changes. If you sell your home, let the next person start paying at that higher price, because that's the price they're paying. That's not the price you paid. Mm-hmm. We don't tax people on unrealized capital gains on their investment portfolio, such as stocks, but we are letting the government tax us on unrealized gains on our homes, on our dwelling units, the roof over our heads. Right. So it's very important that we freeze the property values, give people a break. I believe in Ohio, there's legislation that's fixing to pass, or maybe it already has, where they're wanting to tie it to the official inflation rate. That's a progressive move in the right direction. But I would just recommend that we freeze everyone's rates, give everyone a break. If you want to stay in your home 20 years or 50 years, hey, that's wonderful, right? Home ownership is it does create a strong foundation for a state and for a nation. So I am a big advocate of owning your home. However, it just doesn't make sense today to own a home. If you're just starting out, the average age of a first-time home buyer today is 40 years old. Yeah. In 1997, I'm going to give away my age here, I'm 46, but in 1997, when I graduated high school, that age was 29. Right. So we're seeing families start to delay the creation of their families and have children, right? Because they're wanting a roof over their head, a home that they call home. And so I think one of the first things should be that. Another thing that we need to do is we need to move seniors age 65 and above, are disabled, and our veterans to the front of that list, and immediately expand their homestead exemption on their primary residence and on their primary automobile to 100%. And what that would look like is no property tax. So we have a homestead exemption today. It's $49,200 on the first value, I believe it is the number. Saves you about $500. Here in Montgomery County, we're about 1%. And then we're about 1.25%, I think, or so 1.25% in our city zone of your property value. So that means for each $100,000 of property value, you're going to pay $1,000 to $1,250. Right. No, that's a lot of money. You know, and most people's home is valued at 2 or 3 times that. I think that the median price of a home today is about $260,000 or $280,000. So they're paying close to $3,000 a year, and it's all due at once, right between the two largest holidays of the year. You know, what worse time could the tax bill show up and it'd be the largest one?
That's right. Well, I want to say, I think you put your finger on where there is already an appetite for this. There's been a couple of bills over the last few sessions where we've basically wanted to adjust that homestead exemption, especially for people 65 and older, and especially people on a fixed income. You know, as their property value is increasing, they're going to have to sell their home and be kicked out at the end of their life. All right. Come back after the break. We'll talk more with Shannon Denniston.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson of the Kentucky Liberty Caucus. You can find that online, KY Liberty Caucus, CAUCUS.com. I'm also going to be taking over as president of the Louisville Tea Party. I have on as my guest today, Shannon Denniston. He is running in Montgomery, Bath, and Menifee County next year for what was David Hale, who he's good friends with, David Hale's state rep seat. David Hale is entering retirement, and thankfully we have good people like Shannon Denniston stepping up to run for that office. I encourage everybody, if you have a passion for some of the issues in your community, consider running for office. It doesn't need to even be at the state level. Run for a magistrate, run for your local school board, your judge executive, county clerk. There are various opportunities for you to serve your community, and I encourage everyone to consider that. The filing deadline, I think, is on the 9th of January. It's certainly in early January. So give it some thought over this break. Okay, so in the last segment, Shannon Denniston gave a passionate discussion about progressively, gradually eliminating property tax and the importance of that and how it would actually help to reduce both rental costs and it would make it easier for people to enter into first-time home buying. That is, I don't know if it's average or median, mean or median, but the average age of new first home buyers has elevated from around 29, just about 25 years ago, all the way up to 40 now. So we are making it very difficult for new young families to enter into home ownership and property ownership. So he discussed that at length. Why don't I just go ahead and and I do want to pitch, by the way. If you want to find out more about Shannon Denniston's campaign, or if you want to donate to his campaign, you can go to denniston4ky.com, DENNISTONFORKY.com, and you can put donate in front of that if you want to go directly to his donation page. I'm sure he has a link on the page also to donate directly to his campaign. Okay, so let me just throw it back over to Shannon. I know one concern that people have is when you start talking about eliminating property taxes, they're worried about all the things that those property taxes are that need to be paid for. Things like nobody wants to see their local police, their fire, their local public school shut down, and most of those things are paid for primarily by local property tax. Is that also a priority for you?
Absolutely. So we're not talking about doing away with funding or advocating for ending the funding of the schools, fire, EMS, libraries, police departments, any of those items.
Absolutely.
Well, all we're talking about is changing the funding mechanism away from a property tax, away from making people have to rent their housing from the government and rent their automobiles from the government. Such a crazy policy. You know, we're wanting to move away from that over to a sales-based tax. So a sales tax, just increase the 6% to what level it needs to be. It looks like it's maybe around 3%. If we cut government, we can probably get it down in the 2s to replace all the property tax from motor vehicles. We're looking at about another % increase to do that. So 9 or 10% from 6% should get the job done. We could rip the Band-Aid off and go there immediately if there's support for it. But government likes to move slowly, right? So we're just talking, I just want to reiterate, we're not talking about reducing funding at this point. We're just talking about changing the funding mechanism. Right. And then also, I am a staunch advocate for limited government, and I do want to make cuts to government. And I will be a voice in Frankfurt that is saying, let's cut government, let's not expand it anymore. Right. People are fed up with the size and scope of government. It seems to make too many decisions for too many folks. So,
and our show last week was actually about government waste and some of the crazy spending that our state government has. And I'm less gung ho than you are on property tax. I'm supporting your campaign though, because when we are electing people to our state legislature, what we're wanting to do is move the conversation. I want to elect people that are passionate about reducing taxes, all types of taxes, and they're passionate about cutting waste out of government. And if we elect Shannon Denniston to this office, I have no doubt that his influence is going to shift the conversation in a very positive direction. And I hope our listeners agree with that assessment. Continue on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Thank you, Lance. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be a no vote a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the reality of it. I don't want to grow government. I want to reduce
That's
government.
right.
And I hope to inspire other people behind me to step up the state level government to join me once I'm there. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. And actually throughout this whole campaign, I've been preparing sort of like a guidebook to help other people follow in my footsteps, if you will, because there's really no real training out there for this. Right. Where do you need to start at? What does an event need to look like? Where do you need to be spending your time? Where do the votes come from? Things like that, and how to put it all together. So if anyone has a question about running a campaign, I'm right here in the thick of it. And I'm sure it's fixing to get thicker, but but I do have a lot of knowledge I can share, and I'll share it freely. I just want to help other people step up. So real quick, I do want to mention something that I forgot to mention earlier. Part of my plan is to make building materials tax exempt. Builders have a very, very hard task to build a product and sell it for a profit today. And not just building a home to sell it to someone, but building a home to rent to someone too. Right. It's very difficult to make the numbers work where you can produce a profit. And if there's no profit, then obviously no one's going to do it. So we don't want to catch builders, developers, home flippers with that increased sales tax and create even more of a burden for them and make housing less affordable. So to counterbalance that, if you will, my plan is to make building materials tax exempt for providers of housing to others. So not for you to build your own property to live in, but if you're creating housing for others, or you're buying a dilapidated building or property and you're flipping it, making it habitable again. I believe that the materials you use in that process should be tax exempt to you, just like farmers, for instance, that have tax exemption, for farms. So they grow our fruits and our vegetables and our meats. Builders, developers grow our housing.
No, it's and this is why I like his campaign. These are creative ideas. If you want to reduce the cost of housing, how about we reduce the cost of actually building it? So, I mean, a very simple concept. So why don't we exempt that from our state sales tax? One other thing, and this is a more point of personal privilege. One tax that I personally hate is about 4 or 5 years ago, we reinstituted a tax on nonprofit and religious organizations selling goods and services. So, for example, imagine during Lent, all those Catholic churches that have fish fry. I guarantee most of them are not actually paying for this tax, but according to our state legislature, we're requiring them to pay a sales tax on any goods or services. Maybe you go to the YMCA to work out. You probably have noticed that you're now all of a sudden in the last few years, you're having to pay a sales tax on the spinning class or the yoga class that you're taking in the YMCA now. So that's probably a very small tax. Other sales tax that I think he mentioned, building materials. I think that's a great idea to exempt that. How about exempting the costs of young family formation, things like diapers, car seats, those sorts of things? Why aren't we exempting that in order to encourage people to start a new family and basically take some of the burden out of that? So I think there's a lot of taxes that we really need to look at, and most of these are actually of minimal cost to the state. We could implement these things and really not take a substantial hit to the funding that we do need for essential services. We're not advocating removing all services. Shannon was very clear that he just wants to shift the funding mechanisms more than we're not trying to eliminate local police. We're not trying to close down local public schools. We're not trying to have your fire department be unable to put out a fire if your house catches on fire. Okay.
A sales tax. Yep. Sales tax is less regressive than the property tax. If you fall on hard times, you don't have to eat out. You can eat at home. Groceries are tax exempt.
That's
so
right.
you could cook at home. You can dial back your spending during financial times.
That's right.
Hard stuff. You can't do that with housing. Your tax bill is your tax bill, and it all has to be paid at once. I mean, maybe the government should look at, in the interim, as we roll out the no tax, maybe look at allowing folks to pay those payments quarterly or even monthly, because there's such a high bill to pay, especially for people on a fixed income. It's a huge portion of their income. There's people today that in the hollers of Kentucky, if you will, their electric bill exceeds what their mortgage is.
Absolutely.
And that's starting to become a loud discussion, is the cost, the price we pay for our utilities. And then on top of the utilities, there's a tax from the wonderful government. So should utilities be taxed? Utilities, for necessities of life, and that should include internet today, I think, and telecommunications, your water, your sewer bill, your gas bill, your electric bill. Should we be putting tax on those? And then on the insurance premiums, should we, be allowing government to put, say, a 10% tax at our city levels on our homeowners insurance bill, when it's already hard enough to pay that bill because it's already went up, because the value of the properties went up. So now the insurances went up. Everything's going up except people's wages. So we need more economic activity in Kentucky so that there's more businesses that come to Kentucky, more factories come to Kentucky. I believe they will when there's no tax on their structures, no tax on the real estate on the earth where they build their factories. And then, the best part of it all is it's going to drive up wages, because now there's competition for labor. We have a very skilled workforce here in Kentucky. We have people that are willing to work hard and do work extremely hard. And it's very important that people are paid what they're worth. And it's just not happening today.
Right. Okay. We've only got about a minute and a half left. I do want to just basically talk about one thing that we touched on earlier, another point of unfairness. People that don't have their children in public schools, maybe they have them in private schools, maybe they're homeschooling them, their children are not able to use those public school facilities. I mean, certainly probably some exceptions exist. I'm sure it's happening somewhere, but as a general rule, they don't have the right to use those public school facilities that their parents pay for. Can you just do a really quick pitch on why that's important? Some of these are often called TBO bills.
Sure. Yeah. So what I propose we do is we move athletics below the purview of Parks and Recreation. That way tourism dollars can be used for that. Some tourism departments are sitting on a large amount of cash that could be used to improve and build facilities, and then open those facilities up for everyone, all schools, government and non-government school children, because their parents are paying for them. So I just think that would be a more fair way. And I know we didn't have a chance to get into some of the other stuff, but if you'd like to carry the conversation later, I'm certainly open for it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. I know that Steve Doan has been passionate about this. Why shouldn't the general public, when the school isn't using it, be able to use that track that they help build? So just as an example, why don't we come up with some innovative ways in order to get better use and more use by the taxpayers of the things that they pay for? All right, I want to thank Shannon Denniston for coming on. Go to Denniston4ky.com. Thank you. This is Kentucky's Voice.